Amway.
Okay.
Because, and I'll talk about this when we're rolling too, because, economy's tough. People are struggling, inflation.
Yeah.
And so
I still talk to Jimmy every day.
do you?
Jimmy Head, yeah, he's a super good buddy of mine.
Nice.
Drove out to
Jim and Judy.
Yeah, Jimmy Head, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I talk to him all the time. And,
Awesome.
And I'm still a customer of his, and I buy stuff randomly. And
Yeah.
he talks to me all the time about, hey, you want to get back involved, and Jimmy, you gotta get to figure this guy out. You're going to get back involved. You're gonna be pumped up. I'm like, yeah, man. And maybe soon. And so he's always working on me to get back involved and actually build. And the hardest part is my whole life is decimated from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock, which is when I'd be building that business, because between, the times where I get the kids ready to eat and get things going to be able to go to bed or what have you.
Small army ready to eat.
So the kids get home at 4 o'clock and I'm all 100% kid until 7. Unless I happen to have a showing or, have to make a couple phone calls or something. And that's about it. But
crazy.
I like the idea of the income streams. I haven't found my secondary niche that I'm really comfortable with. I got, did a few different things, but nothing.
Yeah, I want this. This is good stuff. Yeah. Oh,
you're
rolling.
rolling.
Okay. Well, hey.
Oh, see, well, there you go.
Welcome to Office Talk with Stephen and Jimmy. Jimmy couldn't make it today, but that's okay.
Sorry. Hopefully I'll meet Jimmy at some other point. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah. Good to see you, buddy.
You as well, man.
Did we figure out when was the last time we saw each other? It's been like 20 years, hasn't it? It's been a long time.
I think we saw each other in the midpoint of that at some point, just in passing by, because I think you were out with Rachel, and I think I saw you somewhere, and that's
got to be it.
It was probably 10 or 12 years ago at least, because it was before most of my children.
Yeah, and then most of your children. How many? So you had 11?
I have 11 total
11
right now, and I don't know if you remember, I had 2 daughters that passed away, so I had 13,
right.
And then I've had. So this is interesting about me. I've had 13 children technically.
Wow.
And then I've had 5 miscarriages between 2 marriages. Yeah. So I've had 18 total children. I've been married for a total of 18 years.
Wow.
So I've had a pregnancy every single year that I've been married.
So you don't even know what it's like to not have a pregnancy, basically.
Absolutely no clue. In fact, I always joke about it, I bought tampons one time. Like, don't send me to the store. I'm like, I'm proud. I'm like, you know what? This is good news. We made it a month. It's fantastic.
Chad's back again.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really interesting to live a life that is 100% purely based on your children, because it changes your perspective.
So I got to ask then, I mean, obviously we had one miscarriage, and my brother, they had a miscarriage, lost their baby at 5 months old. So when you go through something like that, how do you put it behind you and just keep, I mean, some people just shut down. They're like, we can't do this anymore.
So my first pregnancy ended in miscarriage. Then right after that, my son Cameron was born, who's 21 and married now.
Oh gosh,
and,
I remember Cameron. Yeah.
Cameron had his lung removed when he was a month old. And I thought, man, this is going to be the worst thing I'm ever going to go through. This is terrifying. They called me, and I just remember the phone conversation. She's like, he has a cystic adenoma malformation in his lung, and he needs to get rid of it. And I was like, okay, well, so do you just pull that out? They're like, no, we have to take the entire lung out. And so at 1 month old, I was like, oh man, that's terrifying. And that kind of set me up to put that wall up pretty early.
Yeah.
And
like a callus, just
more of a realistic fear factor. Really understanding that not every pregnancy goes to plan, not every child is born healthy, and we got pregnant directly after. Cameron was about, I think he was only about 3 or 4 months old when we got pregnant with Hallie. Mm-hmm. We got to 9 months with Hallie, and we went in for a non-stress test because my wife at the time had gained 95 pounds of water weight.
Oh, wow.
And it didn't even look natural. She was leaking out of her system. So her legs were cracked. There was green fluid flowing out of her skin. And this was right about the time I was in the business. And
which we'll get to that.
Yeah, and we got to that part where it took a different turn, because she went into the hospital that night and they said, we got to get this baby out now. And when they pulled the baby out, they gave her a C-section, and her stomach exploded. Like the fluid hit the ceiling, hit the doctor, and was so much back pressure. And when they pulled Hallie out, she was green, and she weighed about 9.5, 10 pounds of pure fluid. And her eyes were swollen shut, her tongue was sticking out of her mouth, her ears were cauliflowered. When you see that, the fear, the terror, everything that rises inside your body, and knowing that you're probably not going to be able to take care of this little person, or that person's not going to come home with you.
Yeah.
They put her on a ventilator right away. They started to drain the fluid off of her body, and she was born with a rare birth defect called chylothorax and advanced lymphatic dysplasia. And that,
It's a mouthful.
it is. And it makes, when they bring in fluid in any manner or capacity, whether it's through a G-tube or nasal tube or if it was bottle fed or what have you, their systems are perforated the wrong direction. So instead of the lymphatics sucking all of the fluids in and pushing it out of the body,
pushing it out. Interesting.
it releases it into the tissue in your ears, cauliflower. That's where your eyes and everything swelled shut. And so she wasn't breathing very well. She lived for about 3 months. And when she passed away, my whole world changed.
I bet.
You know, all of a sudden, everything that you believe in life.
Like, why me? Why
Yeah. And so I took a very godly approach to it. And we, I don't want to say advertised because that's not the correct word, but we took the opportunity to be able to talk about Christ and say
Right.
that, you know, how many people in their lifetime get a chance to give back to Christ what he gave to us. One of our children
Right.
passed away in somewhat of a merciless way with scars and battle wounds. And that was a big impact. And so when she passed away, we had a pretty strong foundation. We looked at starting a ministry called Halle Grace Ministries. I had written some books about miracles in the Bible for children to read and enjoy. And then we got
children's books? Or?
yeah, children's books based on miracles in the Bible.
Yeah.
But they were from the opposite perspective. They were written about Daniel in the lion's den, but it was the lion's perspective of how he got lockjaw and didn't understand what was going on. Or David and Goliath, about the stone that was sitting by the river that he grabbed to kill Goliath, but he was the first rock star. There was a couple of different,
Interesting.
different twists, ideas.
Fun, that's fun.
Yeah, and whales with indigestion for Noah, or Jonah and the whale. So it was interesting. So I wrote a series of books based on that, and then we found out we were pregnant with Emma, and everything went well through 21 weeks. And then all of a sudden we went in for the 22-week ultrasound because she was high risk. We were going every week, and they just let us know that she had the exact same thing that Halle did, and that her mortality rate was 99%, and the chances of her making it out alive even of the womb was difficult. And so
was this like some sort of a genetic marker?
it's autosomal recessive gene that
Okay.
is a 25% chance of it happening every single time. So it doesn't get any less. And that was the combination between my ex-wife and I, and that was what created that fear factor.
Yeah.
But that's when you ask, how do you get past a miscarriage, especially after you have children, because you know how much you love them and it really
Right.
puts it in perspective. I think that because I had been through such large amounts of trauma earlier, a miscarriage to me versus my wife or my current wife, my ex-wife, it wasn't as debilitating.
Mm-hmm.
And there was I always try to look through the blessings for things. You and I have talked about that for years.
Yeah.
Even with as long as we haven't talked, every time we do talk, we're like, hey man, look for your blessing inside of the challenge.
Right.
And I somewhat went through all of that. And I went through a brutal divorce, and my ex-wife had lost all of her fervor for life for a while after the second daughter passed. And that really gave me a perspective of how to deal with loss and what you can do with helping other people because of that loss.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So what are the dysplasia? I can't even pronounce what you
Lymphatic,
just said.
yeah, mhm.
Thank you.
Lymphatic
Is it like
dysplasia.
one in a 1,000, one in 10,000?
Back then, it was in the millions. It was like 1 in 5 million, and they said the chances of it happening back to back were like 1 in a billion. It just should have never happened that way.
Right.
Since then, the interesting thing is, back when we first found out about hydroptic lymphatic dysplasia, you look it up on the internet, there was 300 or 400 websites that had anything on it at all.
Right.
And now if you look up that exact same thing, chylothorax with advanced lymphatic dysplasia, hydrops, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of websites referencing it. So it must have had a leap in some degree
Yeah.
as far as knowledge of what it is, or it actually started happening more. And the interesting thing was, when my first daughter had been born, they were releasing the fluid and decided to cut her open to try what was called a scrape surgery, where they would scrape the inside of the lung and the underside of the pleural space underneath the lung and the lymphatic system itself to try to get it to stop leaking. And when they did that, it didn't stop the leak, but the wound itself allowed the fluid to leak out.
Mm-hmm.
And she was on room air oxygen for about 3 weeks because that wound was open. And they said, if she's on room air oxygen for another week or two, you can take her home. We got pretty excited. When that wound closed up, she puffed up like a balloon and was gone in 3 days. I was begging the doctor at one point, and I said, hey, is there any way you can just reopen the wound and let it drain? I said, if we put some sort of a, port there, that we can, like a G-tube, right?
Exactly.
You put a G-tube there, you can close it off and continually sanitize it and keep it under wraps. And he went back to my wife and said that, he said, your husband just asked me, he said, he wants you to take razor blades and cut your daughter all up and let her leak out the fluid. And I was like, I didn't say anything
Pretty much
like,
didn't say that.
I didn't say that at all. I said, that sounds absolutely brutal, but you know that the thing that was keeping her alive was the wound in the first place. Oddly enough, now that's how they treat hydroptic lymphatic dysplasia.
So it sounds like you were really kind of on the forefront of a lot of, like, doctors didn't really even know
They had no idea what it
handle
was, and when Emma was born, they gave up on her the day she was born. They didn't do any treatment. They were like, we'll keep her comfortable until you want to let her go.
Yeah.
And so the pain of that was pretty crazy. And they even told us, they were like, she's euphoric. She doesn't feel anything. So if we pull the plug at this point, she's not going to feel it. She's going to slip into a coma and go to sleep, which is what Hallie had done.
Right.
And when I pulled the plug on Emma, she was fully awake. She was fully alive. I watched her turn blue. Her lips were sucking and gasping for air. And I can still see it in my head right now. And I was talking to my wife about Hallie and Emma this morning, just because of the miscarriages and things we've gone through. And so it prepared me for the ability to help other people through tragic loss, like nobody's business. When people tell me, hey, I just lost my wife, or I just lost my best friend, or I lost a job, whatever it is, the ability to handle the stress from other people and be able to bring them into my fold and say, man, I tell you what, I've been through a lot in my life.
Yeah.
And I can walk them down paths that they may not be able to see otherwise.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, man. And you guys just kept going, and it's 11 kids. I mean, the first thing I thought of when you said 11 kids, I'm like, what's the go-to? Is it like just 10 cans of SpaghettiOs? Like, what do you...
Actually, you know what? The craziest part,
How do you plan dinner?
My wife is a magician. She'll look in the pantry, and I'll check things out that are in there. I'm like, well, you guys can have pasta, or you can have pasta. Those are your
like
choices.
A punch pass at Costco? Like they know you're, it's the Mitchells.
Yeah,
hey.
it's an interesting trip. When we go to Costco, we usually have to plan for an extra half hour, 35, 40 minutes, because the people that work, they're like, man, how are the kids? And we're walking in with 2 carts full of kids, and 2 or 3 are walking.
They haven't even started
with us.
shopping yet.
Yeah, no,
2
the
full
carts are full.
yeah.
Yeah, so we have to try to finagle it around the children and put it in there. But
that's awesome.
I also drive a van that's a 12-passenger van, but it's got a 3-inch lift kit on it. And it also
tinted
says
windows.
It looks super cool. It's got TVs
Spinners.
in it, but it's got really nice rims on it, and it actually says Salt Lake City, Utah on it, which when you get out with 12 kids, automatically assumes something. He's laughing and doesn't. He already knows, and I haven't even said anything. So the ability to look at, people look at that and they're like, oh, so you're Mormon? I'm like, no, I'm not Mormon. You Catholic? No, I'm not Catholic. I'm really attracted to my wife, and I have horrible timing, apparently.
God love you for that, though, man. That's awesome. That's
absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, and there's nothing I'd rather do. My children are amazing.
Well, so, and you, I mean, obviously, we met through Amway years ago, and you've run a number of businesses, and it seems like you've always been successful at every single one of them that you touch. Maybe there's some I don't know about, but so you're a realtor now, right?
Yeah.
So is that, I mean, obviously with scheduling, it's probably a little easier because you can kind of set your schedule and figure it out. But how, I mean, with the economy the way it is now, with real estate, with rates going up, I can't even imagine what happens when money starts getting tight. Like, I mean, I would think that people are constantly looking for other ways to make money, and
True.
I'll tie that into
Absolutely.
Amway in a minute.
100%. Amway was a great opportunity to learn about how to become a professional.
Yeah.
Whether that's in what you do now or what I do, I think that we both learned a pretty consistent effort from the books, from the tapes. When you see how they work, there's some things about the business you look and go, I am not a big fan of how that particular person ran it. And I was even thinking about this the other day before I